Hey guys, welcome back! In today's video, I'm going to be going through the process of making Razon, the undead baby dragon, so stay tuned. First of all, I'm going to start making the horns for this baby dragon, and I wasn't too sure how I wanted these horns, so I sort of just winged it and thought what was best at the time. So I'm using an air dry clay, and it's got a little bit of elasticity, so it is a bit more stable than any Sculpey or anything, and it's not so fragile and won't break. So I'm just going for a long, flat, thick horn at this point. And I like to sculpt the details in before I actually attach this horn. Otherwise you end up pushing the horn off the resin piece when you're sculpting the details. So you can just get down the rough details while it's off the resin piece and then add some in the future. So I'm going to work this piece into the little section that I've sculpted and then I'll be attaching some glue once I've molded the piece to the resin section. So once I was happy with that, I just added that same tacky fabric glue that I use for everything else. It's great glue, so why not? And it actually holds this air dry clay really firmly to the resin. So yeah, if you have any tacky fabric glue, I just recommend using that. So same deal with the second horn, and you just got to keep an eye on the symmetry when you're sculpting the second horn, just so one isn't bigger or smaller than the other, because it will look a little odd. And the same deal, molding that horn to the spot on the resin piece. Alright, so here's what we've got so far. And I think I decided at this point that I wanted to do sort of a ram horn. So once that glue is slightly more dry and it won't pop off the sculpted pieces, I'm just going to go ahead and bend this clay just so it's into a ram horn, and then I'm just going to leave it to dry. And here's what we've got. I'm using a resin piece that I have cast glass eyes into, and I'll just show you a quick comparison against one that is just purely cast in resin with no glass eyes, and that I'll end up painting the eyes in. So you can see how different it is and how different of a look it gives. So I'm definitely going to try and make more dolls with this glass eye. Right, so I'm going to go in and paint the base layer of this dragon, and I'm just using a neutral grey in that chromacryl acrylic paint. And this is the first layer, so it is a little bit transparent, but I will go over it again with a couple more layers of paint. So the beauty with glass eyes, you don't have to be so careful with the paint because you can actually wipe it off or scrape it off at the end, so it won't damage any paint job you have done to the eyeball. So definitely give it a try. And here's that coat on, just leave it to dry, and I'm going to come back with a slightly watered down black paint just so it gives a bit of a black overtone to it, but I'm going to wipe off the excess black paint. So for the top of the head, I ended up using a more watered down paint just so it can go in all the little cracks and crevices and scales that this dragon has. So I'm just going to let this sit aside to dry for now, and then I'll come back with some more. Moving on to painting the horns, and I wanted a sort of white to black ombre horn with the white at the tip, so I'm going in with my black paint first, and I'm going to be painting half of this horn itself, and then start from the back end of the horns with the white and sort of just blend it into the middle. And again, I'm just using chromacryl acrylic paints, but you can use whatever paint you want. So as you can see here, I'm going in and slowly blending in that white paint to the black, so it gives a nice grey ombre in between. So I decided to paint the space around the eyes in a black just so it can bring out that blue colour in the eyes a bit more, and I thought it worked really well. So just a little tip if you want more vibrant eyes, to have some black around them. So after giving it a couple of layers of paint just to get that transparency through, I'm going to be adding some white highlights to this dragon because I know a lot of those undead things have a lot of white highlights. So I used Viserion from Game of Thrones for this inspiration, and you can see that they have put a lot of white highlights on the dragon skin there. So I'm just going in with some chroma acryl paint again, using a very dry brush and just dabbing it in corners that I think it will look good. And so here's what the effect ends up looking like. And I'm going to go for a different effect here, and I'm painting in these metallic blue veins onto the horns. I just wanted to do something a bit different and relate back to the eyes itself. So I'm using a paint by Jacquard called Lumiere, and it is a pearlescent blue, and it has a really nice tone to it. Moving on to the feet, and I'm using the same resin cast and the same painting process as the head, using the grey undertones and then going over with some darker paints to fill in all those cracks and crevices. So, and I'm using a black paint for the nails and the pads of the paws. So once that's painted up, we can move on to the fur. So I'm using this particular fur, it's called Mongolian fur, and it has a nice grey undertone with white tips. I like using this fur for dragons because I kind of think it looks like dragon scales or dragon spines at the end of it. And you can see how I have drawn on my body patterns for the dragon, and I'm just cutting it out now using the tip of my scissors. Rather than using a large fabric scissor, it just ends up messing up your fur. And once I have run it through the sewing machine, like I've said before, I prefer the sewing machine over hand sewing the entire thing just because it's a lot stronger and a lot more durable. But I've left the back end open as I need to get my hands up the bum. Alright, so turning it inside out, and here's what we have, a nice fluffy thing that looks like nothing. So I will be trimming this, and the reason why I chose this fur is because I wanted that grey undertone to peek through. So here's what it kind of will look like once it is trimmed. So after I've made the armature and attached all the resin pieces, I will then sew it up using a ladder stitch. And then once I've sewn that up, I will then attach that fur with that same tacky fabric glue from the start of the video. So for the wings, I'm using this fake suede, and this is my material of choice. I've tried a few materials for wings that I just really didn't like, but I found this worked the best. And I was going to go through a tutorial in itself about the wings, and I don't know whether I'm going to do it a paid version or not yet, so yeah, stay tuned for that. So as Viserion has tattered wings, I wanted to make these wings pretty tattered. So I went in and hacked it at it with a small pair of scissors, just so I could make some jagged holes and it looks a bit messy. And I very much enjoyed hacking at these wings, and I'm really happy with the way they turned out. They turned out pretty cool. Okay, so once we have attached these wings, here's what we have so far. I will be trimming them and just finishing a few things up before I can list this doll up for grabs. So he will be up for grabs in my Etsy shop, if you can check it out if he hasn't already sold. And here's what we have as the final product. Alright, that is it from me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. If you have any requests, leave it in the comments down below. And you can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Nat. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!